don't have to follow the scripted path. Figure out what makes sense for you. And this goes back to how do I coach teams? How do I lead teams in an organization? And what I've realized is there's the well-worn path. You know, you can keep life, you can keep your pursuits between the 40-yard lines, or you can go out to the tails and try something that's a little bit higher risk, but a lot higher reward if you do it.
Welcome to Corporate Competitor, presented by Forbes Books, the podcast where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. We've had executives like Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian, who played baseball, and Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan, who played rugby at Brown. But today, we welcome John Tuttle to the show, President of Acrisure, one of the fastest growing fintech companies in the world. Acrisure has grown from $38 million in revenue to nearly $5 billion in just over a decade. And with 19,000 employees, they span 22 countries. And its name now proudly sits on Acrisure Stadium, home of the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of my favorite teams. Before joining Acrisure, John spent 17 years at the New York Stock Exchange. And before that, he was a wide receiver in high school and at the Mid-American Conference's proud Eastern Michigan University. He brings that same team-first competitive mindset to his leadership today. Now, make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights. John, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Don, and the Corporate Competitor podcast as well.
We're going to have a fun conversation here. I've loved studying your career, getting a chance to learn a little bit more about you and the company. But I want to start with the New York Stock Exchange. You had an amazing 17-year career there, and you held a whole series of leadership roles, including vice chairman, chief operating officer. And you've said that networking was a key to your success. It's interesting because a lot of people today don't know exactly how to network anymore, right? We think networking is going to a reception, but but you had a quote. You said, once you get in the door, you also need to find a way to stay there. I love that quote from you. So talk to me about that. Talk to me. I'd love to have you teach me a little bit about the networking style of John Tuttle.
Oh, boy. Well, maybe I would take a step back and say, I probably misspoke when I said networking, because someone once planted a comment in my ear that there's a fine line between networking and not working. So I want to make sure I don't appear that I'm straddling that line at all. But what I think we really mean is building trust and relationships with people, and showing them that you're here to help them, not yourself, that the mission's before you in everything you do in your organization, and frankly, in your life in many cases as well. So for me, I was very fortunate to have the door opened to incredible opportunities by incredible people. And once they did that, I had a responsibility to make sure I showed I deserved to be there. And how do you do that? You build trust with your colleagues. You build trust with your leader who brought you in there, because the more and more they trust you, the more and more they can delegate to you, the more and more responsibility you will assume. And then next thing you know, good things happen. So when there is an opportunity, somebody leaves or an opportunity presents itself, you're top of that list to be tapped for that spot. So I can think of that happening many times in my life. When I was a young pup and found my way down to Washington, D.C., it was someone who opened the door for me at the White House. And that person still remains a close friend. And in fact, is a business contact as well, and a client in the past when I was at the New York Stock Exchange. And then even making my way from DC to the New York Stock Exchange, it was somebody I had met in Washington, DC. They saw that I was going to work hard, I was going to build trust, I was going to put the mission first, and that I was always going to work hard to fill gaps. So if there's a gap, it's not, there's no room for anybody that can come back to you and say, it's not my job description, or that's not exactly what I do. You just do it. And when you do that, when people are looking to build teams, they think of you. And so that's how I got my way into the New York Stock Exchange. And that door was open, and several others after that. I just had to find a way to make sure I stayed in that room that I was invited into.
So I love that. You fill gaps when gaps are needed to be filled. Is there a story? Is there an example of a gap you filled at some stage where your willingness to step in paid dividends for you?
Well, I think it's just, Yeah, I think every bit of my career is a result of that, and I'm luckier than I deserve professionally and personally to have the good things happen to me. But I think they're a result of when you see there being a gap, you just step in and do it. So, whether it be when the financial crisis came around in 2008, 2009, not waiting for somebody to tell you to do something. I remember going back and if I went back in time, I was in the office at 5:30 in the morning. I was leaving at 10:30 at night. And I don't necessarily say that as a point of pride, but it's a data point to say, when you're there, when there's work to be done, you just do the work. And when you do the work, you learn a lot of things. And when you learn a lot of things, you can connect a lot of dots. And when you can connect a lot of dots, that opens up a lot of opportunity for you as well.
And obviously, that work ethic was something that was a part of this build trust concept that you're talking about. I love that, because I think many people think the trust should be given, and
Right.
that's not true. Trust is earned.
That's very much right. Trust is earned. And, particularly in high performing environments where you have high performers and high stakes. And so you want people that, when you ask them to do something or something needs to be done, it is going to get done. And I could give you countless examples of how that's happened over the past 18 years. But when I look for team members, that's one of the attributes that you look for. You're looking at resumes, sure, for technical skills, but you're looking to say, is this the type of person I can trust? Is this the type of person that I can see growing with me on this journey? Is this the type of person that I can coach and mentor along the way? Because when you do that, you're able to give them more responsibility, and then that cycle continues to another generation of leader.
You've given some great examples of things that you learned to do to help build trust, build relationship. One of the things we know about our listeners is that they're always trying to learn, and one of the places they sometimes ask questions of us about are like, well, what are some things they did wrong that maybe a lesson that you learned somewhere along where you maybe overstepped, or something that I can learn from? Is there an example of a place where?
Sure, there's probably too many than I'd like to admit, but that's how you learn. You don't learn. You learn from a lot of ways in life, but you learn a lot from failing, or you learn a lot from doing something wrong as well. And I know this is the Corporate Competitor podcast, and we'll have a chance to talk about how sports plays an important role in someone's development and leadership journey. And for me, I think sports was a big part of that, where, I make a point of pride where I didn't drop passes. And one time I dropped a pass, and, if you had a blood pressure cuff on me right now, you'd probably see my blood pressure rising as I talked about it. But you learn from those failures. In school, sometimes, you're given opportunities that you don't fully appreciate until sometimes you squander them. And then, you realize, you screw off in school. Sometimes that sets you up for a bad journey in life. And so I had to take a couple of bad grades and turn them into a successful academic career, but it kind of took me going through that experience to get on the right track. So there's countless examples that I could give. And even, even in the New York Stock Exchange, those are high profile moments for companies, for people. And, things can go right and wrong. There were a couple of times where outages took place on our platform, but it taught us what we needed to do to have a more resilient, better platform, because the world had its expectations and its focus on us. And so, again, too many opportunities, or too many failures than I like to admit. But I think they've happened in sports, they've happened in business, they've happened in life, and it's all about learning from them. And here we are, 25, 30 years later, still talking about them. I don't think about them regularly, but they've certainly shaped my team's way of approaching situations.
When I read a little bit about you, and then when I listened to you talk about how you showed up during the financial crisis, while working at the stock exchange, a word that seems to resonate for me is grind. Right? I look at you and I think you get grind. How one of the challenges I think some people see is there's a younger generation that doesn't seem to appreciate grind as much. How, as a leader, how do you teach grind?
Such a great question, Don, and something I think about often. The most important thing you can do is lead by example.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you have to put in those same hours of 5:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, but you want your team to know you're in it with you. And it's one, setting the example and showing the next generation of leaders in an organization that you're in it with them together, the good and the bad. And when you win together. When you lose, you win together, but you do it all together. The second point I would say is, it's finding the right level of recognition to give your team. You've probably heard from many of your guests in the past, and certainly from other leaders, that recognition is almost more valuable, or could be more valuable in some cases, than currency, than actually paying someone or compensation. And so finding the right way to motivate people and to highlight those successes that are out there and to publicly praise your team, that inspires people. They get excited. They taste something and get hooked on something that is bigger than themselves and motivates them in ways that they never maybe had seen or were aware of coming into it. And I think the third piece of it is, as a leader, finding the right way to coach your team members on finding that equilibrium between patience and ambition. You want really hardworking people on your team. You want people that want to take over the world. If you ask them where you want to be in 5 years from now, they say, I want to be in your chair. But you also have to teach them the patience that comes along with it. And for everybody, it's a calibration, and it's not always set at a certain level. It has to be adjusted from time to time. But it's finding that right balance, that equilibrium between making sure you keep that ambition that someone has and get them excited about it and show them that there is a path for them, but also teaching them that there needs to be patience and you need to do the work. And here's why that's important for what you're trying to achieve individually and collectively.
Boy, that's a powerful lesson right there, because I think especially, I don't know about when you were younger, I struggle to remember when I was younger, but when I was younger, patience was not something I was gifted with. I felt like I wanted it, and I wanted it now. Like, whatever the next advancement was, I was marking the days, and that's probably bad behaviors if I go back and look at them today. When you say that you can coach the team on patience versus ambition, coach me. How do I teach that?
You're putting me on the spot for it, Don, and you're a special case as well. So, but if you were on my team, it's certainly highlighting, and getting people excited to be part of something bigger than them, understanding what motivates them personally and professionally, and obviously kind of helping steer them in that direction, helping them achieve that. But really explaining, and I know this sounds cliche, but it's explaining the why. Why do we need to do these things? How does it contribute to that overall goal, that overall mission? And people will start understanding that if you work hard, there's not, life doesn't come in a series of step functions where I'm an analyst today, 2 years later, I'm an associate, then I'm an associate vice president. In some organizations it does, but for high performing individuals and folks that really are ambitious, they're going to understand that it's going to be periods of, the slope of your growth curve is probably not as steep as you'd like it to be. And then there's going to be a moment where somebody comes in or something breaks free, a logjam busts through, and all of a sudden you're brought up the curve, you're white knuckling it again, and it's a nonlinear career path. And so helping people understand that that's the way the world actually works. And if you kind of try to overly script your life, for some people that's going to work and help them achieve what they're looking for. But for super high performers, that's usually not the path to success.
Yeah, I love it. So speaking of grind, using the word there, I want to, we talk about sports a lot here. And I know you played wide receiver, Milford High School, jersey number 24 during your senior season.
You're bringing back memories, Don.
We love the photo. We'll have it in the notes here. The team went 3-6 that year. But you had a big win over a rival, right? Heartland. If you think back to those Friday nights under the lights, is there a memory from high school football that still sticks with you today?
Well, first of all, congratulations on digging up that information. It almost escaped my brain. So no, I certainly remember it well. I'm just kidding. It was we had a great team, great group of guys, great memories. Many of us are still in close contact, and so there's a lot of great memories, a lot of great achievements. Touchdowns, wins, not enough wins, too many losses. But I think there's a lot more lessons that come through it, and maybe yeah, as much as I try to avoid talking about myself too much, I will just kind of give you a little bit about my path to playing football, because I only played 2 years in high school. I was into skiing. I was into different activities and sports when I was in my first half of high school. And a buddy of mine kind of, made some reference when we were together that, football was harder than I thought it was. And, maybe don't think that you're the type of person that could play it. So I thought, well, I got a point to prove here. I find this interesting and somebody's telling me I can't do something. So maybe I'll just, not listen to him and, pursue my own wishes here or goals here. And so what I do is I thought about it and I said, all right, how do I start playing a sport I'd never really played in an organized fashion before? Of course, I followed football. I liked football. I was relatively athletic. And so, in most cases, you would, sign up for football, show up to camp, hope to get picked, be assigned a position and all that. I thought, how can I fast track this? And so
wait. Let me coach you on patience versus ambition.
Yeah. In this case, it was more the ambition.
Right, exactly.
But I'll tell you what I did, and not to tell too long of a story, but I found out that the Michigan football camp was taking place in a couple weeks from then, or maybe a month, a couple months. And I thought, well, wait a second, this is a great way to get up the curve. This is kind of like a crash course in getting prepared for the season. So I signed up for it. And I guess at that time, I probably thought it was more instructional than what it was. And, what these, Division I, Big Ten football camps are is nothing but a recruiting exercise. So I show up and it's me and, all the 5-star All-American McDonald's athletes of the year, Gatorade athletes of the year. And, I went through a pretty quick indoctrination into the sport. And so the lesson, and so then that gave me a fast track. I was ready to go and I got up the curve quicker than most. But I think the lesson there is you don't have to take the path that everybody else takes to get to where you want to be. And so you don't have to follow the scripted path. Figure out what makes sense for you. And this goes back to how do I coach teams? How do I lead teams in an organization? And what I've realized is there's the well-worn path. You can keep life, you can keep your pursuits between the 40-yard lines, or you can go out to the tails and try something that's a little bit higher risk, but a lot higher reward if you do it. And so, I mean, with all due respect, you can, if you transition that into the professional world, you can go the traditional path of getting a job. You can apply through a website and HR and all that, and that's all good and it works for people. But there's also better ways where you can be a bit of an HR ninja, where you have access to so much information out there. Dig around on LinkedIn, dig around on the internet, talk to people, and find where you have commonality with somebody in an organization. And what you realize is at most large organizations, there's somebody that played the sport you did, somebody that went to the school you did. You have some commonality, and just find your way to that person and find that path that makes the most sense. It may be the path of least resistance, it may not, but it's going to be the most effective path as well. And it can get you up the curve or get you to where you want to be a lot faster than the traditional approach.
I love that, and I totally agree with you. But is there a lesson that so these 2 years in high school, and then obviously you go on to play at Eastern Michigan, but is there a lesson that football taught you that you still apply today?
Well, the first is it's about putting in the work and knowing what you're doing, because at the end of the day, there's a scoreboard. And you can have all the excuses and provide all the context you want, but at the end of the day, there's a scoreboard. And so having lived and worked in the public markets for, the better part of 2 decades, you see that translate there too. You have a stock price every day, in the market, they care about the context sometimes, but at the end of the day, your scoreboard's there every single day and your performance is being judged. The second is the importance of the team. And that became apparent early on. I started playing football in my junior year of high school. I was the captain of our team our senior year. And so understanding how to, be part of a team, motivate a team, but also build the trust and respect of your teammates to know that when it comes time to make a call, when it's 4th and goal or when the game's on the line, they're looking to leadership, and you got to be able to make that call. So I think it's a combination of putting in the work, understanding the system, but also having confidence in yourself that you've done the work, you understand the system, that you're in a position to make the call, and people will look to you for that. And that's what kind of fast-tracked me in the football world.
Before we continue, I want to remind you that if one of your 2025 goals is writing a book, but you don't know where to start, I'm here to help. In my new role as publisher at Forbes Books, I'm working alongside a world-class team to guide aspiring authors like you through the process of getting published. Whether it's a story, a big idea, or a project close to your heart, now's the time to make it happen. Just visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started. You said a line earlier that I want to go back to. You said you prided yourself on never dropping a pass.
Oh, yeah.
So where does that come from? Because frankly, one of the things about being a receiver is that you don't control both ends of the ball, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the pass is poorly thrown, if the pass is in the wrong spot for you to make the most of it, there are places there that put you in a very tough spot. Where did this idea, I'm never going to drop a pass, where'd that come from? And talk to me about it.
Yeah, well, as much as I love the wins and I love being with winners and people who love winning, you remember the losses, to your point earlier. You remember the mistakes. You learn from your mistakes. And I used to when I was given my first big job at the New York Stock Exchange, I was probably in my very early 30s, and I was asked to run our largest business unit, our flagship business unit. And I thought about, what are the attributes, what are the principles that I want this team to kind of internalize and instill, and I think are going to help us perform at the highest level. And in fact, I wrote them down on a card. I carried them around in my pocket. There were, some of the folks that joined the team that would paste them, up on their desk, and they didn't do it because they knew I would see if they put them up next to their desk. They did it because they believed in them. But one of them was, winners take results personally. And there are people out there, and I commend them, that can, take their losses, take their failures, and just kind of write them off and move on in life. Then there's the people that learn from them. And so for me, I feel like winners take results personally. And it doesn't mean they need to be an albatross hanging around your neck or, keep your head down for the rest of your life, but let them motivate you in the right way. Learn the lessons from that and understand that, when you make mistakes, you can let people down, but you can also motivate people the next time around because of them. So for me, it was I made it a point. I didn't drop passes that came to me, and not to go too far down a rabbit hole or get my blood pressure back up again. But, I distinctly remember against Novi, Michigan, when I was in high school, and, a fade was thrown to me and the ball was in the lights the whole time, and it hit me right in the numbers and I dropped it. And, nobody cares about the context. The point is I dropped the pass. Yeah.
You're not struggling with that.
No, it doesn't. I don't have any issues, Don.
Counseling hasn't gotten over that. You haven't gotten over that through counseling. No,
but those are the things in life that motivate you. It's when you don't do what you really worked hard to do, that, you got to learn from it. You can write it off. You got to move on. You can't, life moves in one direction forward, but let it shape where you go. And so I don't think about it except maybe once a month, still 25 years later, but it motivates me and changes the way I think and lead teams. And everybody has those moments in life. And as you look to build teams, you want people that understand. They're like, look, I'm not looking backwards in life. I'm not wedded to the past, but I'm well informed by the past. And consciously or subconsciously, I'm going to use those lessons to help shape my future. And so that's, I think it's one small example that's illustrative of either the way I think that works or the way that I think that's probably, psychologists would tell you is a little off. Actually,
it's funny. I'll share with you one day a Michael Jordan story that he and I were involved in at one stage where a line that he said to me at the end of the event was, a loss is not a failure until you make an excuse.
Exactly.
And that unfortunately for too many people, when something goes wrong, they'll talk about the lights that they couldn't see the ball in, as opposed to being driven by the failure of the drop pass. And so Jordan would say that he rode that to the very top of his career. So I don't know that I would say it's a negative if a guy like Michael Jordan might point to the same thing.
Well, I'll take the liberty to say that is the first and only time in my life I've been compared to Michael Jordan, but I'll take it. But I would also say, you raised a very interesting point, Don, and it's something that I would say is a follow-on to that, and something I think about a lot in business, in life, in sports, and it's something that the founder of the company I'm at right now, Acrisure, and happy to talk all about this incredible company and its journey, but it's something that he reinforces regularly, that at the end of the day, success starts and stops with leadership. And so making sure you have leaders that are informed by what works, what doesn't work, understand what motivates people, what motivates them personally and professionally, and helps them all march towards the goal line or, some sort of milestone in the workforce. It's success starts and stops with leadership.
I want to ask one more football question because I do want to get to Acrisure and I want to learn more about your journey there. But you walked on in Eastern Michigan, but then you suffered a pretty significant ankle injury playing basketball, right? What the heck were you doing? You had football as an opportunity, but it changed your path.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how that setback shaped your dreams.
You have a plan, and you think you're going to work really hard at something, and you're focused on achieving a specific goal, and then life can throw you a curveball. And so I was, in the spring of 2000, I was playing basketball in my buddy's yard, and around that time, playing basketball in my buddy's driveway. Ball went out of bounds. I went to hurdle a bush, landed on a curb, and it wasn't a good day for my left ankle. But needless to say, it forced me to refocus my life and what I wanted to achieve, and kind of think about my future a bit more than I had. And I'd always had an interest in corporate affairs and in public affairs and in current events and public policy. And so I was sitting in my dorm room. I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I'll apply for an internship with my congressman. And I found out all the information that was there, that was required for it. I needed to send a resume, write an essay, and get 3 letters of recommendation. And now, fast forward, we're probably just around the time of 9/11, and so I guess 2001. And you know what? Why not swing for the fences? Maybe I'll try for the White House as well. And I didn't come, I came from a wonderful family, successful family, but they weren't donors or politically connected or anything like that. And so I went on the White House website, which, believe it or not, in 2001, a website was still pretty novel concept back then. Yeah, having a website, but it was a big deal. And the same requirements: write an essay, get 3 letters of recommendations, and send a resume. I thought, all right, 2 for 1. Let's swing for the fences here. And, I never heard back from my congressman. I ended up getting, the White House program was trimmed down after 9/11 from, to probably 25 slots out of maybe tens of thousands of applicants, and got my foot in the door, stayed in the door. And, fortunately, I'm luckier than I deserve. And that was the only job I applied for in my life. So, and the rest of it was just, back to the points we made earlier: building relationships and trust with people, and good people hire good people and take them along for the journey.
Wow. I got to make a note of that. Good people hire good people and take them along for the journey. So, swing for the fences. I love that. And would you also consider that reasonably a theme to your, the way you kind of look at things, just a willingness to say, yeah, others might say that doesn't work. I mean, to your point earlier, right? Don't follow the scripted path, swing for the fences.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't know any successful people that welcome is like, I just want to be the 5th best at what I do today, or like I'm gonna maybe not give it my all. So no, absolutely. You want people that are willing to take big swings in life. Not at every single thing and recklessly, but there's a fine line between being aggressive and reckless. And so you want to find what that line is, and finding it, you're going to figure out what's reckless, where the mistakes are, but also, you want to push yourself to your limits, and you only get so many trips around the sun. So why not spend them, to their highest and best use? And excellence should be the only thing worth waking up for in the morning, and do what you need to do to go find it.
Wow. You're spinning these off. Excellence, is something you should wake up for every day in the morning. I'm going to have to try to find myself a recording of it. Oh, wait, it is being recorded so that I can go back and capture all these lines. But you credit one of our past podcast guests, Condoleezza Rice. I had the chance to interview her while I was at Sports Illustrated, in the West Wing. Fantastic conversation. But you credit her as an early mentor during that internship at the White House. Talk to me about it.
Yeah. So park your politics anybody's politics to the side is what I would say. Like, that is one awesome human being, Condoleezza Rice.
She is.
Forgive my kind of loose language there, but just an incredible human being. And I'll tell you why. Because you see these people on TV, you see these people that are well known, And some of them you see behind the scenes and they're not what they're cracked up to be. And some of them you see behind the scenes and they're a lot more than what people even think they are. She's certainly in the latter camp. And I say it not just from intellect and grind and work and achievement and having gotten to travel with her to her hometown in Birmingham, Alabama, and seeing where she grew up and the power of having good parents who care about their kids' future, and what you're able to achieve, even from environments that are not really conducive of that or not really informed at telling people that they have this path in life that they can go pursue. It's that. But even the fact that somebody that treated somebody that was in their early 20s with as much dignity and respect as they did a head of state or a foreign minister that came through there. And so it wasn't just my time there that gave me kind of great admiration for her and many others like her, but just because I had a close-up look to her. My first day at the State Department was her first day at the State Department. So I got to be on a lot of that journey with her as Secretary of State. But also fast forward 20 years later, there would be times where Secretary Rice would be in New York City, find time on her schedule in Lower Manhattan, reach out and come by for coffee. And, there I was, a young pup in my early 20s, and she's still keeping in touch and can learn from people, whether they're in their 20s, their 40s, whether they were a junior staffer or now in a senior position at the world's most preeminent stock exchange. Understood that, it's about building relationships and trust with people, and, good people are around good people. So, and even inviting me out to Stanford when I'd be out visiting companies in Palo Alto and Silicon Valley, and I'd have the opportunity to stop by and visit her at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. And there was a lot, I enjoyed our conversations a lot, and the fact that, quarter century later, the relationship was stronger than when I was just a junior staffer on her team. But also, since this has some sports related podcast to some degree, I do have a lot of respect for her in the fact that one of the times I visited her office, she had a Cleveland Browns helmet proudly on display. I think they had no victories that season. She was not a fair weather fan. She stuck to her knitting, and so respect for that as well.
Did you talk football with her?
She has an encyclopedic knowledge of American football that I would not even attempt to, go toe to toe on.
So I'll share with you the reason I ended up in the West Wing interviewing her is that I had interviewed George W. Bush the year before for a piece that we were doing for Sports Illustrated, and I'd gone to the Oval Office, interviewed him, and a year later I get this phone call from White House Communications, and it's, hey, the president and Condi were just at Camp David, and they were talking about the upcoming football season, and she was predicting every conference champion for the upcoming year in college football. And the president said, we should get that Sports Illustrated guy to come back in here and talk to Condi. And so that was the open door that allowed me to and she did. She predicted literally every conference champion in the upcoming college football season, and she was right on all but one. It was crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't luck. She put in the work, because I would be on trips overseas with her, and she'd find a way to wake up in the middle of the night. And back in the early 2000s, it wasn't easy to be able to find a way to watch an American football game overseas. But we found a way, and she didn't just watch the game; she studied them, and I think that's why she was able to make the calls.
That's right. So, give me a lesson you learned from her specifically. I mean, I know this idea of treating people with dignity. At all levels, right? Not just because someone is a head of state. She treated you as a young staffer similarly. Was there another great lesson maybe that Condi taught you that you still apply as a leader at Acrisure?
I mean, probably plenty, but I think you hit it right on the head with regard to treat everybody you work with dignity and respect, because you never know where they're going to go. And so, I've been fortunate to and have been luckier than I think I deserve in business and in life. But, same thing goes for people I've interacted with. I've tried to take that lesson, both in Acrisure and at the New York Stock Exchange. You don't know where some of these folks are going to go. And so folks that were junior people at an embassy somewhere when I was at the State Department are now the foreign minister of the country. And you have real relationships with these people. And I'll tell you, even another one, I won't out exactly who it is, but I'll certainly say he has strong ties to the sports world, and they get deeper by the day. But when I was at the New York Stock Exchange, it was a Friday night at 8 p.m. I got a phone call saying these 4 bankers from a Middle Eastern country, from a bank I'd never heard of, a local regional bank. It was their dream to visit the New York Stock Exchange. I thought, they came all this way. I can make their dream come true. So I took them around on a Friday night in 2007 or 2008. And one of the gentlemen asked me to take his picture above the trading floor. That gentleman now kind of runs one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds. I've been to his house in the Middle East. We've stayed in touch, but it's all about, you never know where these people go in life.
And is he engaged in golf right now?
No comment. But that picture was that individual's LinkedIn profile for over a decade. So it's
Isn't that awesome?
You never know who you meet or where they go.
That's awesome. I love it. In a podcast, you actually shared a powerful piece of advice, podcast that we listened to in preparation for today. You said some things won't always go your way, but you need to realize that it's better to be running towards something than running away from anything in your career. Can you tell us a story about maybe from your career when running towards something was what allowed you to become so successful?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is you can split that statement two different ways. I think the first one is when somebody says something's not possible, it's doing it. It's running to the sound of the guns. Where is there a no? Where is there a problem? All of that. So kind of run to where the problem is, and not from it. And you'll learn so much. You'll gain people's trust and respect, and you're in the arena. You're in the game versus being on the sidelines hoping somebody else solves it. And you learn so much from that. The second is professionally, from opportunities. You may get looked over for an opportunity that was your dream, that you thought was your dream as well, and learn from that. Understand the why, but don't run from it. Don't do anything out of protest. Always be running towards something, not from something. And
when you say learn from that, how would I learn from that? Let's say I've missed an opportunity. This was my dream. They chose someone else. How do I learn from that? Well, give me a learn from that example.
I think it's learning to sometimes take an involuntary reaction driven by ego and just say, wait a second here, let's step back and assess what's best for the organization, not for you at this moment as well. And my goal is I want to be able to put a dot on the chart of the day I joined Acrisure and see the slope of that curve steepen and be able to, we have 19,000 employees, have 19,000 plus people, and our millions of clients across this country and around the world have a better life, a better experience, run a better business, be better protected because of me being here is incredibly rewarded. And you learn a lot of things that sometimes may be obvious to other people, but sometimes you need obvious to hit you right in the face to realize that a lot of the things, you say, how does a fintech platform that really its core foundation is insurance brokerage relate to the New York Stock Exchange or the 13 other markets that we operated across asset classes and geographies in my past life? It's like a lot more than you would think. And what's actually interesting is you're one of the only people that's made the move from that sector to this one or this one to that one. And so you're able to connect dots that people haven't had historically. So the opportunity to take the lessons you learned that you may not have fully even appreciated when you signed up for this opportunity, apply them here and steepen the slope of that growth curve even more and bring people along with you is incredibly exciting. And to do it in your own backyard in Michigan is all the better.
All right, so we're going to skip more Michigan questions because
I could go all day.
I could watch you. You could go all day, but I do want to know. You talked about running towards something. You talked about maybe thinking of yourself at the stock exchange, staying there forever. What was it about Acrisure that you saw as something you wanted to run toward? What was it about the company that when you saw it and when the opportunity was presented to you, what did you see that made it something to run toward?
It's a really good question, and I would answer it like this. In my past job, or anybody in their own job, with enough repetitions of anything, you get pattern recognition. So as part of my job at the New York Stock Exchanges, I got to meet with the greatest management teams in the world, the greatest companies in the world, the greatest entrepreneurs in the world, those that made it to the grandest stage in business and those that aspire to as well. And so after meeting thousands of people and understanding them, their businesses, their personalities, you develop a sense of pattern recognition. And I could tell you in minutes what companies were real, which weren't, which leaders were real, which weren't, what entrepreneurs were faking it, which ones weren't. And I got introduced by a mutual friend to the founder of this company. It was September 21st, 2021. I remember finally I was at a business dinner. I looked at my phone and the email said, connecting two great Michiganders. I'm sure you have plenty to talk about. And fast forward.
Oh, see, they threw Michigan in the,
yeah,
in
I'm
the
a
subject
one-trick
line.
pony,
There you
Don.
go.
Yeah, exactly.
Just step
You know
away
the
from
key to my
dinner for
heart.
that.
You know the key to my heart. But fast forward to January of 2022. I came out to Grand Rapids, Michigan for what I thought would be a 30-minute introductory meeting with the founder of the company. And it was negative 17 degrees, one of those polar vortexes that comes through the Midwest from time to time. The sun was shining, the roads were pure ice, and I show up for this 30-minute introductory meeting. 4.5
You make
hours.
all of that, by the way, you make all of that sound like
So
something
appealing.
straight from the tourist bureau of Michigan. Yeah.
Oh, well, you have to pay with the winter to get the summer. There's no better place to spend it on Earth, but you pay the price in the winter. Needless to say, I came in for that 30-minute meeting, 4.5 hours and a missed flight later. I walked away saying this is one of the greatest companies in America. At that time, probably statistically, nobody had heard of. And so over the years, I stayed in touch with the founder. I shared what I was seeing in the markets. He would provide an update on the business. I found myself talking more and more about this company to other companies I was talking to. And so, fast forward about a year ago in the spring of 2024, I like to say he asked me out on a first date, second date, third date. Proposal was made, a wedding commenced, and now I'm exiting the honeymoon. Now that I've been in the job for about 7 months, so it's time to put results on the board.
I love it. Is there something about, you talked about pattern recognition. I love that idea of being able, if you spend enough time studying excellence or being in the presence of excellence, you begin to identify what the habits of excellence are. Are there a couple of those patterns that you saw in those conversations, something that told you, yeah, this is going to be special? I mean, maybe it'll help me, A, understand a little bit about the company, but B, understand a little of what I should look for if I'm trying to seek the same kind of patterns.
Yeah, it's the same patterns I think you see when you're hiring people as well. So you can look at the fundamentals of the company, and analysts can tell you the fundamentals of the company are strong, weak. They can make their own assessment that's there. But I go back to success of anything starts and stops with leadership. And so, what are those attributes of leaders or people? And everybody can be a leader in their own way, of course, that are going to make them successful. I think number one is they have to be humble. They have to be humble. There's a humility that's important in leadership.
I love that. I'm making all these notes. I end every podcast by sharing with the listeners my 4 greatest takeaways, and I don't know how I'm going to limit yours to 4, but awesome. I want to ask you real quick, because I think this is fun. You recently secured the naming rights to the Steelers Stadium in Pittsburgh. Funny enough, my producer and I were just joking that this podcast, we're kind of making our way through the NFL right now. We've had the Empower. We've had an Empower CEO from Chicago. We've had the Lumen CEO from Seattle. Now Acrisure. So, as someone who played football growing up, how meaningful is it to you to have the company that you're leading have this relationship with one of the most iconic organizations in sports?
Well, for me, it's incredibly meaningful. I think it's great. I love it. I will tell you, none of the credit goes to me. All of it goes to our founder, whom decided with Art Rooney to secure the naming rights of the stadium for a while. And he didn't do it because he's a big Steelers fan, though coincidentally he is and has an encyclopedic memory of the Steelers. We did it because it was the right thing for the company. And for me, I love it. I love seeing the Acrisure logo up there. I love going down to the field, seeing the players that are there and being reminded that these people are human specimens and from a whole different, gene pool in some cases than the rest of us. But it's a lot of fun. And what I love about it is it's great for the sport. It's great for exciting people in our organization and getting them to feel part of a team, whether it be Acrisure, the Steelers, or just seeing their brand, their company on Monday Night Football. That sense of pride you get from that across our 19,000 plus person organization is really, really rewarding. So we love it. From what it does for the Steelers organization, what it does for our business, what it does for our people, frankly, as well. And if you think about the names that are out there from a business standpoint, or the opportunities that are out there from a business standpoint, if you look at professional football, I'd say there's 3, maybe 4 teams that are really well known globally. You've got the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Packers, and the Pats. Probably, there's broader based awareness of the other teams, but not to that degree. And being a global business operating in 22 countries, that's great for us. And, you didn't ask me about my views on marketing, but I'll volunteer them anyway. I'm not necessarily a big believer in TV ads or print ads or billboards or anything like that, but being able to provide a steady drumbeat over and over and over and bring that broad-based awareness of who we are. And what I love about it is everybody that walks in that stadium, everybody that turns on that TV, white, black, rich, poor, male, female, business, individual, they're going to need insurance. They're going to need the other products and services that we can provide them, and we can help them run better businesses and better lives. So it's a win-win across the board.
So I have one last question. I wanted to dig back to an answer you gave me earlier where you were talking about the importance of making sure your employees know their why, right? This idea of like, why does what you do matter? Why does it matter to those who we serve? Why does it matter in the greater scheme of what we're trying to achieve? One of the great, when I talk to a lot of executives, and one of the great challenges executives are facing today is employee disengagement, right? It's this idea that they're kind of, they're not as locked in as we'd like them. And you've seen some of the research. How are you as a leader trying to navigate that? How are you trying to help those who are looking to you for some guidance and leadership? How are you trying to keep them engaged? What are some of the things you do that I might learn from?
Yeah, I don't know if I have any specific solutions, but I would say it's a broader theme of you show up. You show up. Great. For thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, people have thrived by coming together, not being apart. And so bringing people together, understanding that why of you're together, understanding the mission and working together to get there is going to bring about success. When you talk about sports teams, I've never met a sports team that practiced remotely and won a championship. I've never met a business that was, fully remote and achieved all they could have. And I never met anybody who achieved their dreams in life by, doing it remotely. So bringing people together, building those relationships, building that trust, building that camaraderie is so important for achieving excellence. So I think it's showing up.
I love it. Show up. John, I am so grateful. As I said, I've got pages and pages of notes here that I'm going to have to sort through. But the wisdom was powerful. And today, I thank you for being a corporate competitor with us.
Well, Don, thanks for all you do. This is great. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope your listeners don't dig in too much because they'll realize that the good athlete in the Tuttle family is actually my wife, not me. So there's more to learn from her than me.
Wow. Boy, that was full of energy. I'm glad I didn't ask one more Michigan question. That could have been overwhelming. John has so much passion for what he does and what he is helping others do that it is infectious without question. But I'm going to offer up 3 lessons. There were a whole bunch. In fact, I've got a sheet full of them right here, but I'm going to pick 3 that I think were most meaningful to me and that stood out, different than what I've heard from other people. One, I loved his discussion about the importance of being someone who will run towards something, not run away from something challenging. He talked about running to where the problem is, and that when you do so, when you show yourself as that person who will do exactly that, first off, you'll learn more because you're in the middle of the problem. And secondly, you're in the game. And if you're in the game, you have a chance to maybe make that play that others will remember. So run towards something, not away. When challenges exist, make sure to do that. The second was he talked about the importance of being in study of organizations. He talked about the good fortune he had during 17 years at the New York Stock Exchange of actually getting a chance to learn from and dig into companies all across the board, right? And that as he was looking at all of these companies, he settled into some pattern recognition. He was seeing things about the best companies that he didn't see in other places. And I love this other description. He talked about the larger the surface area, the more of these kinds of companies you're getting a chance to learn from or about, the more dots you'll be able to connect. But when it came to dots, I asked him, what are some of the dots of the best companies that you saw? He talked about the leaders being humble, right? Their ability to lead, be successful, maybe be someone that everyone else is looking up to, but they remained humble. He talked about the importance of organizationally your ability to self-assess. Look at what you're doing, look at what you're doing wrong, and what can you learn from that? But you have to have a deep desire to win. Like that, I mean, winning has to be extremely important in order for you to be successful in one of these companies. And then he talked about pretty soon as you start doing these things, you start to realize what success looks like in more and more organizations. Really powerful. So then the third of these was that he talked about don't follow the scripted path of everyone else, right? I mean, that great quote about him swinging for the fences, applying for the White House internship. How powerful was that? And then how one person says to get an opportunity, someone might tell you that there's an opportunity that you're not really qualified for, but by the way, don't look at what they say the path should be. Look at what you say, what you believe the path to be. Take a risk, take risks, be thoughtful in those risks, but make something of the path you choose, not the one that's directed for you. So I want to ask you, was there a quote or an insight that stuck out with you today? If you'd share it below in the comments, I'm always reading them. I'm curious what resonates with you, and I'll read every one of them. I promise you that. Again, I thank you for joining us today, and I appreciate you.